culture, personal preferences, personalities. Yeah, and we're going to face a lot of issues, a lot of things that come up in our church plan, whether it's something that's more obvious or something more subtle. Suppose you're going out with a Thai evangelist, and you start to hear something like, if you believe in Jesus, you will be rich. Okay? If you believe in Jesus, He's going to bless your bank account. Okay, what would you do? You know, there's going to be differences in how you think, how you operate with your partners. Would you confront? Would you let it go? So we're going to be thinking about that today. Now, from one interview from a very senior missionary, it says, now you can disagree if you want. These are just things that come out of my interviews. I'm just going to share with you what people say. Okay? Thais don't open and share easily due to levels of relationship. Thais are less willing to share problems or difficulties they may have with certain people compared to Westerners. They tend to keep things in their heart. Westerners tend to openly express their struggles even to strangers. How many of you here are pretty comfortable expressing your struggles even to strangers? You meet somebody for the first time, you just tell them, oh, you know, it's been so hard to do this, and you know, just share whatever that's on your heart, you know, and others, you know, it depends on the level of relationship. Do you have a close relationship? Is this somebody in your inner circle that you can share with, or somebody that's in your outer circle that you only share more superficial things? So on one hand, the indirect side of communication, we have the word "grang jai" or face saving, okay? Giving face. People that value relational harmony, peace, value discretion, prefer to use mediators and third person to solve problems. Okay, so in those scenarios I threw at you, maybe you ask somebody else to go solve the problem. Okay, you don't want to confront that person, but find David's wife to tell David that there's a fluff on his hair. You know, find a mediator, controlled emotions. And on the other hand, we have more value towards accuracy, efficiency, punctuality, value openness, prefer personal confrontation. Usually the communication is more open, expressive. And those of you who are in between, okay, there are many of us who are in between. Maybe those coming from non-Western cultures. I don't know about Africans or South Americans, or you know, you may find yourself somewhere in between. And of course, I said it does depend on your upbringing, personality. And just give you some examples. Sorry, it's a bit small. If you want to see better, move up next time. Okay? Sit in the front, the best seat in front. Missionary says, the Thai never asks questions. I'm always the one initiating. The Thai says, the missionary is too busy. His or her schedule is filled up. I feel cranky, I don't want to bother him or her. You see a different perspective. One says, you know, I'm always initiating. The Thai has the impression that this missionary is too busy. Don't have time for me. I don't want to disturb. Missionary says, the Thai never shared with me about his or her problems. Instead, he or she talked to others about them. Thai says, missionaries just want the Thai person to be the face of the team. They have their own goals, agendas. Thai says, missionaries only consult with me about smaller issues, but they make their own decisions about bigger things, like where to place new missionaries or when to go on furloughs. Missionary says, Ajahn, you said you were going to handle the problem, but I haven't seen anything done about it. How many of you can relate to some of these issues or statements? So communication can be very complicated. It's an art, it's also a science. What kind of communication problems are you facing in your industry situation? I want you to just take a minute to think about this. I believe that the main thrust of my message is that it has to start with ourselves. We have to be willing to change. We have to take a step towards the other person. So take a minute and reflect. If you have your notebooks, just respond to these two question is, how can I be more proactive in communicating with my Thai partners? We have to make an effort, okay, whether it's non-verbal or verbal. If we choose not to communicate and not to say anything, the problem won't go away. How can we be more proactive? Maybe it's inviting that person for a meal, or spending time, or finding a creative way to share something that's important to the heart. What must I change about myself, the area of communication? What do I need to change? How do I need to do something different? Take a minute to think about that, and I would like to ask you to, once again, share in pairs. Okay, so talk with someone who's not your spouse, and respond to this. Just give you 2 minutes each. Maybe you can just choose one question, like, what do I need to change about my communication with my Thai co-worker, or my Thai disciple, my Thai pastor? When you're ready, feel free to move a little bit, find someone you haven't talked to that much, someone who's not your spouse, just turn to that person and share with each other. Respond to one of these questions. What's on our heart. Praise God. May the Lord give us more insight and courage to communicate, to find ways that we can bridge the gap and have good communication with our Thai colleagues. Now, one more question. Question number 12 is, how is leadership style cause of conflict? That's another area of the research, that there's a lot of differences in how we perceive leadership. This is not easy. For most of us who are raised in the West, we may find the patron-client type of leadership a bit difficult to understand. How patron provides resources and the client person is loyal to that patron. In the Thai society, when we greet Thai people, when we get to know the person, one of the first questions is, how old are you? Right? Why do people ask, how old are you? Because they want to know who is older, who's the younger, right? They want to know how to relate to you on the social ladder. And then there are questions that follow, like, what's your work? What's your background? What's your education? And they want to know who is higher, who is lower. When the person understands where they fit in on the hierarchy, there's a sense of comfort. They know how to relate to the older person, younger person, and just a bit of humor. And so we live in a society where there's high and low. And this is not easy for many of us to understand. But some of us come from Asian societies. Okay, their hierarchy is very common. But that doesn't mean that we're still completely comfortable, okay, with hierarchy. There's a lot of challenges. For example, some of you may follow the news, what's happening in Hong Kong. Okay? Overseas Chinese protesting because people in Hong Kong don't want too much control from China. It's a bit scary when there's a lot of control, and so this is a conflict over leadership style, politically. Just because Chinese people grow up with hierarchy doesn't mean we're totally comfortable with it. Okay? By human nature, we definitely seek out freedom. And so, I want to share with you some of my experiences with conflict in this area. Last night I shared how I went to Thai Thani with Ampa Sawang Arom for the first time, and after a while that church plan didn't work out well, and my supervisor Steve, the doctor, said, why don't you move into town? Okay, there are a lot of young people downtown Thai, and there's a pastor trying to start a church. So I moved into Ampa Mua, Thai Thani, the church plan. There were a lot of young people that were sponsored by Compassion International, World Vision, and they came out to church. It was an exciting time for me. personally. I saw youth at the church, and we had a youth group, we had a Bible study, I was teaching guitar. I saw a number of youth turn to Christ and become followers of Jesus. I feel like it was a fruitful time. But on the other hand, there was a lot of struggle with communication, especially with the Thai pastor that I was working with. Just to give you an example, this is just exactly what happened. When it came to Christmas time, the pastor said, we're going to invite about 200 people to this outreach because a lot of families were sponsored by Compassion International, World Vision. So we're going to have a Christmas outreach, rent this auditorium. Now, should we provide food for 200 people? Okay, now I looked around and we had 10 people or 8 people in our church plan. I said, I don't think we should provide food, but why don't we give sodas, soft drinks, and snacks? Because we just don't have the funds. The pastor said, well, we can always withdraw from the foundation and just use it. And I felt uncomfortable using the different organizations' money to provide lunch for everyone. So I said, I don't agree with that. The pastor turned to the other 2 people in the committee and said, what do you all think? Of course, the common answer is, it's up to you, pastor, up to you, missionary, whatever you like to do, we agree. So the pastor looked at me and said, okay, we will have soft drinks and snacks. End of conversation. Now, on that day of the outreach, at the end of the meeting, I saw the lunch delivered, from the restaurant, and lots of food came in. I was like, what's going on? Where did this food come from? And I asked somebody and said, oh, Pastor so-and-so ordered the food for us. I tell you, afterwards, I was angry. I was angry. From my background, when you say something, your word is your, you say it, you mean it. Say what you mean. And then what is decided in the meeting is a decision. So I was ready to confront this pastor. I went to his office, knocked on this door, and his wife came out. Said, where's this pastor? I'm going to talk to him. And she said he went away to some meetings in Chiang Mai for 2 or 3 days. He'll be around. So, well, it was God's intervention. I think that if I had talked to him at that moment, I would have said some very nasty words. The reality is that this kind of thing continued as a pattern in our ministry team. Sometimes we say some things in the meeting, but the decision was different. And I turned to some senior missionaries for help. Said, tell me what I should do. And there were some very godly, gentle missionaries. Said, just listen with sympathy, nod their head, but they didn't give me any advice what I should do. I didn't know what to do in this situation, and it just got worse and worse. And I felt like, when we greet each other, it was a very nice sawadi, but inside there were problems that we could not talk about it openly. And I was so discouraged, and even though there were fruits from the ministry, young people were coming to the Lord, I decided to move to another location. And that's when I came to Bangkok to be part of the church planting team at that time. Now, this is just to give you an example of how cross-cultural partnerships run into problems because of differences in leadership style, how decisions are made, differences in communication, and the use of finance. All 3 together was a difficult thing for me. Another book I would recommend is Leading Multicultural Teams. It says, in our research, team members we interviewed consistently wanted their leaders to help them talk with each other, especially in cases of conflict. So this is a challenge for some of you who are team leaders or regional leaders. There may be situations where there's an expectation that you will come in and sit people down. Just get the team to talk to each other. Okay? Help people understand what each other is thinking. Do we need more training in this? I think I definitely do. As a regional leader, I faced, for 10 years in Bangkok, I had many cases where I just didn't know what to do. I didn't have training about conflict resolution. I didn't know how to help people talk, communicate better with each other. So this is something that we need to continue to work on. How to help our cross-cultural partners sit down and talk to each other. Now there are strengths and weaknesses in leadership style. Okay, I just want to let you know that there is no perfect model of leadership. Okay, it has to do with culture, it has to do with our upbringing. So with the hierarchical leadership style, there are obvious strengths, right? There are things that we can see come out of it. For example, if the person is a top leader for a long time, they can provide consistency, they provide a vision, they provide resources for those who are below them. And this is the concept of a benevolent, honorable leader. You can read it in Larry Person's book, the Bottom-Me Leader. Someone who desires the good of his followers, of his or her followers. Okay, so using the resources for the good, for the benefit of the people. And there's going to be consistency in that situation. But there are obvious weaknesses as well. Right? What are some weaknesses in hierarchical leadership? Maybe there's going to be a sense of feeling disempowered. Okay? Some young people may have ideas, they want to try this and try that. They feel like they don't have a chance to try it out because the leader always makes decisions. And so disillusioned young people, they're going to walk away from the church plan sometimes. But they are not given the opportunity to make mistakes, to try things. And with hierarchical leadership, a lot of times there's a lack of accountability. There's a lack of people that can give correction or feedback to the person on top. Models of leadership. I'm not sure where your ministry fits in on this. As you evaluate your ministry, is it more hierarchical? Is it more, flat? There's no perfect model, but I think we need to ask God for help because culture, as I said in the beginning, culture is neutral. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it's good. And so in some situations of hierarchical leadership, we may see that there is a benevolent leader who is honest, who's honorable, who wants the good of the people. And we who come from a more democratic background, we may need to adjust our style. We need to humble ourselves and accept a different kind of leadership style. But there are other times when we discern that there is an abuse power. The use of power is not right, or there are young people being driven away from the ministry because there's a lack of opportunities given. There's a disempowered leadership, and we need to discern that and be able to give some feedback to that person. So we do need discernment, and we need to ask God for help. How do we respond to the leadership style that are in our context? And I think two questions that you can ask yourself is, are Christians around you becoming more passive or active under the leadership? Is it a leadership that frees people and people are excited to join? Even though the pastor may be very strong and, on the top, are people excited to be part of that? Are young people enthusiastic and participating in God's work? Those are things that we can check ourselves. Maybe we see that people are walking away, young people are discouraged. There could be something wrong. Now recognize that there are no perfect models of leadership. We need to look to Jesus. Look to Jesus as our perfect model. Jesus lived in a time when there was very strong hierarchical leadership, for sure. Okay, Caesar was at the top. There were all these centurions that you read about in the Bible, and religious leaders walking around with their robes. Okay, lots of sasanajan walking around in Jesus' days. But at the same time, Jesus said that the sheep were lost without a shepherd. The poor were oppressed. So Jesus modeled for us servant leadership. Let me just close this passage. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. That he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. And the culture back Then it was expected that travelers, when they arrived at an inn, sometimes their servants would come and wash their feet, get them ready for the meals. But on that day, there were no servants around. Nobody to give them a foot massage. Okay, so the disciples were probably looking around, who's going to wash my feet? I'm not going to do it. Not me. No. So Jesus took out his outer garment and took on the role of a servant. He washed his disciples' feet and he said, I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Jesus says, do as I have done for you. I want to just close with this one quote that came from a Thai pastor friend of mine. I respect. I see him as a servant leader. He shared this with me. He said, David, you know, when I was a young man, one day I went to the Hainan camp in China. This is a OMF camp in China province. He says, I went there and I saw Mr. Ian Roberts, who was a missionary back then, and also a field director at one time. I saw Ian Roberts down in the ditches. He was digging dirt. He was making a canal. It was covered with perspiration and dirt all over. He looked like a construction worker. And this Ajahn said to me, I saw that man and I said, wow, that's a missionary. That's a real missionary. He said, I would never forget that scene. And today this Thai man is a pastor. I believe that he is a servant leader. And I just give you the example to help us to think. Why is it that sometimes we do not see models of servant leaders around us? And why is it sometimes we say, oh, this person, you know, the leadership style is not biblical, it's not like Jesus? Could it be that we need to start modeling what it means to be a servant leader? Because the Thais will not see servant leadership until they see it in real life, until they see it in us. If we want to see a more biblical way of serving Christ, it starts with us. It starts with modeling. Hopefully, our lives will impact others. So the final question is, how can we practice a more or model a more humble and empowering type of ministry? It starts with us. As we model, we will see people around us find a better way of serving Christ, a better way of doing ministry. May the Lord help us. Just give you a minute of silence. Just reflect on this. Jesus, for being a servant leader, a model for us. Help us to change ourselves first. Give us a grace, O Lord, to be more like you, to imitate your example of servanthood. We can begin to see change around us. In Jesus' name. Actually, we don't have time anymore, so I want to just leave you with two things. One is that I have here cards. So if you have questions that, burning questions in your heart, just feel free to write it on the card and leave it on this table, and I will try to answer some of them at the end of tomorrow's session. Give me some time to think about it. If you have some more personal questions about your ministry context, feel free to sit with me over a meal, talk in more personal ways. So this is available. And as somebody asked about my PowerPoint. So my PowerPoint is available to anybody who want to get it. I have it on flash drive, or I don't know, maybe Rich or somebody could help me put it on some website you can download. So it's available, whatever you like. God bless. The time over.
Thank you, Rachel.